So, his State of the Union address was just a couple of days ago. I thought Biden did an excellent job. He finally learned a lesson from Donald Trump. Instead of trying to talk to the whole world, he talked to his base, because that's where his problems were. His base was not energized, they weren't enthusiastic. He was appearing weak and frail, and they didn't think he was the right guy to carry their message. And he energized the base, which is where you win your elections. And then he made, I thought, good points to independence, which is the other area where you win elections. So, having said that, and that's nothing new on this program, but I did have some comments and some thoughts and observations about his comments relating to that young woman who was killed by that quote illegal from Venezuela. And first of all, there was this ridiculous kerfuffle among the super sensitive Democrats who still don't have a clue as to why we keep losing people to Trump's base. Saying that they're very upset, and I went on Google and there's a whole bunch of people saying, oh, it's terrible. He called them illegals. And they're people, they're not illegals. I'm surprised somebody didn't say an illegal is a sick bird. I know, that's where my mind goes. So, illegals. Yeah, I think they're illegals too. If you come across the border in violation of the law, you're an illegal. We're worried about their sensitivity? Those people don't even speak English. They're not going to be upset because someone calls them an illegal. They couldn't care less. So I don't know who cares or why, but I didn't think that was the issue. And here's why. And those of you who have listened to this podcast in the past, and said, I'm calling it a podcast. I know it's not, because it's a vidcast or whatever the hell they want to do. That's too complicated for this little brain. So I'm just going to call them a podcast. This is a podcast you're watching. If you close your eyes and just listen to it, then it's a podcast. So if you're bothered by that terminology as much as these frail little liberal friends of mine are upset about the term illegal, then just close your eyes and you'll be fine. I didn't say go to sleep, Mike. Wake up. Damn it. Yes, wake up. I'm talking to you. There, that's better. I guess one eye's better than none. So, illegal. Who cares? If they came across illegal, they're illegal. So I looked it up to see, well, what really was the story with this guy, and the best I could find was he was released, because the question, if you're illegal, you're supposed to be sent back across the border. No questions, no muss, no fuss, just back you go. I think they should throw him in jail or shoot him. I don't care which, either one, whichever is cheaper. So, but if they're illegal, they're not supposed to be released into this country. But he was released into the country. And so the most I could find any place was that the government he was released while they were investigating his status, which means he hadn't been determined to be an illegal, because if he was an illegal, he wouldn't be coming in. So what probably happened was he came in and they picked him up at the border. He was from Venezuela, which is, Biden's given a special permission to those people to come over and seek asylum, almost per se asylum, because they're fleeing a communist, which, the Republicans love to say, hey, you should be fleeing communism because everybody that lives in Venezuela is a victim of communism. So they come over. He undoubtedly applied for asylum as a Venezuelan, whom every politician in this country says if you're fleeing the dictatorship of Maduro, then you are you are persecuted because you're not towing the Communist Party line. If you're persecuted and you're seeking asylum, guess what? American law, which binds the administration, contrary to all these morons saying, well, he's got it in his power, all he has to do is sign an executive order. Well, that's not true. I actually read the law because I litigate that law. So the American law is, if you come in here and you are in danger, if you're sent back, if you're in danger of being persecuted, and persecution is pretty serious business. It usually requires, somebody tried to kill you, or they beat you, or they gave you a credible threat that they were going to murder you. If that's the case, you have to be allowed to remain in the United States. Why? Because the theory was, back when they passed this law before all this explosion of asylum seekers came in, was that it would be horribly inhumane if somebody comes over here and says, look, I belong to X religion, and I came from a country where I was constantly being threatened with murder because of my religious beliefs, and the State Department says, oh, well, okay, well, that's fine. We'll take that down. We'll give you a hearing date, in 3 years. In the meantime, you have to go back to where you came from, where you're facing certain death. So the people out of humanity said, no, if you can establish that you're going to be, if you go back to Venezuela, well, we have to let you in here. So we know where you are, we monitor you and so on, but you have to remain. That's the catch and release nonsense they keep talking about. It's not catch and release. It's catch, and then you apply for asylum. Then if you're applying for asylum, you're given a hearing date, and then you're allowed to remain in the country if you have a credible threat of being persecuted if you go back. So undoubtedly what happened, because he was from Venezuela, and there was a big deal about letting Venezuelans in, which they hadn't been before. They came in large numbers. So undoubtedly he was marked down as somebody who was applying for asylum. And if he was applying for asylum, he's allowed into the country. Now, this fellow apparently had some other criminal matters, but I think they were misdemeanors. I'm not sure. And I'm not going to go look it up. You can look it up yourself. I don't know and I don't care. The point is, he was catched and released under the asylum law as it's written. Something that the Republicans could change. Something the Democrats could change. That, and what I keep harping on is they should require them to apply for asylum. And I saw this back in their home country or thereabouts. So I did see that there was a representative from Texas, his name is Gonzalez, who was saying something similar to what I've been saying without giving me any credit, of course, typical congressman, that he was advocating that they create zones, close to these areas where there's a lot of people fleeing, like Guatemala, the whole triangle, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Salvador, and also if you want to include Venezuela in there, maybe Cuba, where they would have zones outside the country but in South America where they could go and apply for asylum and either stay in those zones if they really felt that they were threatened, or go back to where they came from and wait their hearing date. I thought that was pretty good. But he was sort of intimating that they should use executive action to do that. Well, you can't use executive action to do that because the statute, which no one talks about the wording in the statute, that's what I do for a living, but that's also what these others, including all these talking head lawyers, should do for a living, is read the damn statutes. The statute says in order to apply for asylum, you have to be physically in the United States. And until they change that, there's no way to prevent people from swimming across the Rio Grande, and then when they're picked up by Border Patrol saying, oh, incidentally, hey, guess what? I'm applying for asylum. And if I go back, they're going to cut my head off. At which point in time, if their story is at all believable, the Border Patrol agents have to let them in. And then they go to wherever they go to commit murder. So, or whatever, Biden crimes, or was it, Trump calls it the by criminals or something. I don't know, he calls it some ridiculous thing. So anyway, so undoubtedly this guy came across under U.S. law, came across illegally, was was picked up, applied for asylum, gave a credible story, was given a hearing date, and was released. Now they won't say that. The government won't say that because they're afraid they'll create a storm of criticism. Why are you releasing these people? Just because they apply for asylum. But I'm sure that's what happened because they do this kind of law. And I've seen these stories thousands of times. So if that's what happened, he wasn't an illegal. And I thought that was the point they were going to make. It's not that it's, oh, he's a human being, not a sick bird, so you can't call him illegal. No. I thought they were going to say, and this would have been the correct interpretation, is he shouldn't have called him an illegal because he was an asylum seeker. And people who are here seeking asylum under the U.S. asylum laws are not here illegally. So they're not illegals. They're legals. But Biden didn't want, in the first place, he was caught off guard. He wasn't prepared for that. Why not? I don't know. He should have been. I mean, basically, we're the same age. I don't have any trouble following this stuff. He's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I don't have any trouble. Of course, I do immigration law. But he's president of the United States. And his people, including Mr. Mayorkas, should have told him all of this. He should have this been planted in his brain, how the asylum law works and what the status was, because he knew about this guy killing this person, this young girl. And he knew that the Republicans were going to bring this up. If I had been in the White House, I'd have said, now, Mr. President, this is going to come up. And when it does, don't call this guy an illegal. He was here seeking asylum. You don't have to say anything about that one way or the other, because you're not going to explain the immigration laws, unless you're going to do what I'm asking you to do, which is urge Congress to change the damn immigration law. But if you're not going to do that in that respect, because you notice none of the things he outlined had anything to do with requiring people to apply for asylum in another country. He didn't mention that at all. That wasn't part of the legislation. It should have been. The way the proposed legislation deals with this is that they increase the number of hearing officers so that they can have a quick hearing in depth and determine if these people really do qualify for asylum, and if they don't, get rid of them within 6 weeks to 2 months, as opposed to the 3 years or 4 years or 5 years before they even get an initial hearing. Have that hearing right away. So they said, let's get several thousand additional hearing officers in there and Border Patrol agents, so when these people come in mass seeking asylum, we can pop them through the system and get them out of here. That's not as good as what I propose, because what I propose, they won't be coming in the first place. No one listens to me. But at least what he was proposing would have, I'm sure they have done studies on how long these things take to process, and it's not very long. Process these things. You have to do something about the appeals, though. Because I handle appeals. And you take those appeals all the way up and up and up, and that can delay things for a long time. So I didn't hear any talk about appeals. I just heard about, let's have a hearing. So maybe he's talking about the initial screenings. So if they have more people doing more in-depth initial screenings so that they can make a predetermination that you're not even entitled to a hearing and get rid of them that way, that might work. But whatever it was, the American people need to have these things explained, and he didn't explain them. The Republicans clearly don't explain them because they're not interested in solving the problem. I think that's pretty clear. They're just raw hypocrites on this. But Biden doesn't explain them either. Mayorkas hasn't explained these things. I'm not sure these people even know what's going on in the government. If I didn't do this kind of litigation, I wouldn't be aware of it either. But I do, and I am. So that, the first part, what are you calling this guy? Well, technically, he probably wasn't an illegal. He probably was illegal because he was applying for asylum, which is absurd, but that's the law. And the president doesn't make the law. He has to follow it just like everybody else does, unless he's Donald Trump. In which case, the laws don't apply for him, because every statute out there has a little paragraph at the bottom which says, this law does not apply to Donald Trump. And that's a wonderful thing. Our founding fathers actually even put that in the Constitution. How they knew he was going to be, coming along, I don't know, but they were prescient, those guys. Pretty damn prescient, if you ask me, or PDP. So, but other than Donald Trump, the laws apply to the President of the United States. He's not a king. He can't do what he wants to do, and he can't deny people the right to seek asylum in this case, and particularly can't deny them the right to come to the United States, legally or otherwise, and seek asylum. Can't do it. Got to change the law. And the Republicans won't change the law. The Democrats aren't asking, in my opinion, strong enough curtailment of this abused asylum law. But there you have it. It's like that was to me, that was the issue with calling him an illegal. Wasn't whether or not that's calling him a sick bird instead of a human being. That to me, it was about the fact that he really wasn't an illegal. He was an asylum seeker. And of course, if he had said that, that would have opened up the whole can of worms as to how do the asylum seeker laws work in terms of bringing people like a magnet into this country. Not a maggot, a magnet into this country. So he didn't want to go there, and so he called him illegal. And then he said something which I wasn't sure I heard it right. Hasn't been much discussed at all. He said, and I thought he said, what about the thousands of people that are killed by illegals? And then he didn't even finish the sentence. I thought he said illegals, but then I read up on it, and they said no, he said legals. So I still don't know what he was talking about, because was he talking about legals meaning people like you and I, or was he talking about people who came over here as migrants or immigrants or whatever legally and committed crimes? If he's talking about thousands of people, then arguably he wasn't talking about the general population, because we commit millions of crimes. If he was talking about people who came over here legally and committed thousands of crimes, well, then that doesn't look good either. It's like, well, why are you letting in thousands of people to commit all these crimes, which is exactly what Donald Trump is saying. So it's kind of this is an example of Biden kind of going off script and getting a little confused. And anybody can get a little confused. I get a little confused all the time, according to my stupid dog. And he had a lot of issues he was covering, but that was one that they saw coming, and they should have fully prepared him for that. Just thrown questions at him. Somebody could have put on a wig and pretended to be Marjorie Merriweather Green, and say call her Marjorie Merriweather Green. That's a little inside joke, because Marjorie Merriweather Post built Mar-a-Lago. Hey, just stay with me on this stuff. Don't turn that TV off. Well, incidentally, you should be watching this on YouTube, because you can see me in full living color on the TV, which I did this morning, and it was not a particularly enjoyable experience. So maybe you should stay away from watching me on TV. Yeah, you should definitely stay away from watching me on TV. You shouldn't even be watching me on this screen. Can you make it, turn it so that it goes black, and then you won't see anything. You can just hear my voice, which is bad enough, but it's not the double whammy of seeing me and hearing me. The good news is none of you actually listen to me, so at least your brains aren't going to turn to more mush than they already are. Why are you watching this anyway? There's a TV over there. Go watch something on TV that's entertaining, not informative, but entertaining and informative, not always the same thing. That's a whole subject for a whole different podcast. So anyway, having said that, I think you know where I was coming on, that legal versus illegal immigrant comment, and then this other unintelligible thing about the thousands of people killed by legals. He said legals. What the hell's a legal? I understand what an illegal is. I'm not going to say the sick bird thing again, because I know you're getting sick of it. Yeah. I don't know what a legal is. Again, was he talking about legal immigrants, or was he talking about people who were born here, like I was? Well, I wasn't born here exactly. I was born in Louisiana, but that's close. That's close to being a U.S. Obviously, I'm not a U.S. citizen, so I could never be president. Other than that, I would be. But they see, born in Louisiana. Sorry, pal, you're not an American. So, yeah, I know. James Carville had the same problem. But why are we talking about James Carville? That's an absurd thing for us to be discussing at this important time in our nation's history. So you know what? I'm going to wrap this up. It's been a real trip for me, and I'm sure it has been for you too. Au revoir.